item number 8. It's the next in list of the emergency powers during the state of national emergency, and then the next item in open will be the extraordinary item, and then we have one item under confidentiality, which is the appointment of people to Haumaru and to the chair of the City Rail Link. So item number 8, I will move to put it on the table, the resolution in front of you about noting the explanation, delegating emergency powers and ratifying any decisions. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Second it, Sharon Stewart.
Sharon, accept that as the seconder, and I've got in the room with me, I should have in the room with me, Meredith Webb, the Manager of Public Law, Mace Ward, General Manager Parks, Sports and Recreation, but also the Acting Controller at the moment, and Kate Crawford, who's the General Manager of Auckland Emergency Management. So I'm not sure who's going to lead off on that, Phil Wilson as well, and Phil, you'll be leading off. Oh, Meredith.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll ask Meredith to lead off on the explanation of what we're looking at and why this is being recommended by staff. Thank you.
Thank you,
Meredith.
Thanks. Hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Great.
And we can see half of you on
half
on
of
the,
me.
on
Sorry.
The slide. Yeah.
Try and get the angle slightly better. I'll just begin with a quick overview of the report and the attachment. So the purpose of the report was to give you an explanation of the various roles and responsibilities during the current state of national emergency and to seek a delegation of emergency powers to the Group Controller. So if I just turn to the attachment first, I'm sure that you're aware that two very important things happened in the last week. So first we had the Prime Minister sign an epidemic preparedness notice that activated some special powers that medical officers of health out the functions and the powers of both the CDM group and the group controllers, and in particular the emergency powers set out in Section 85 of CDEMA, which sit under the legislation with the CDM group. However, in practice around New Zealand, these powers are generally delegated to group controllers, and that is normally done via the Civil Defence Emergency Group plans, or they are sometimes delegated to the group controller during a specific event. So Auckland has no standing delegation in respect of Section 85 in its group plan. And so that's why we're here talking to you today. The report also explains the role of the group controller, which is to exercise powers delegated to them, such as those Section 85 powers that I've just referred to. And we also note that the group controller has a number of powers that are directly conferred on them under SEDEMA itself. And it's important just to reiterate that all of these powers are at the moment in the state of national emergency being exercised under the control of the director. So that's the basic overarching framework. What we're seeking today is a formal delegation from this committee acting as the CDEM group of those Section 85 powers to the group controller. And so this delegation is essential to ensure that the group controller can operate on an efficient and effective basis, and it can respond to directions from the director that are given under urgency. We're also, just for the avoidance of doubt, also seeking to ratify any decisions that have been taken by the group controller since the declaration of the state of national emergency. Hopefully that gives you a broad overview and just an indication of the specific things that we are requesting, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has on the report.
Thank you very much, Meredith. We've got the echoing back again. So let's see if we can sort that one out. Okay, is that better? Yep, I think it is. Right, so we'll take questions first of all, and I'll run through, as I suggested before, the list in alphabetical order. So if you don't have a question, just say no, thank you. Councillor Bartley.
No question, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Nothing, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Collins. I'm not sure whether we've got Fesso online or he's got his mic off, but I'll come back if he has a question. Councillor Coombe.
Yes, tēnā koe, Mr. Mayor.
Just whether you've got a question, Councillor.
Yes, I do, yep.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Kia ora, Meredith. Just a couple of questions that I did send through in advance, but I appreciate that was only this morning. Could you please clarify exactly the kinds of decisions that we are being asked to ratify under C? And I totally appreciate these are all the emergency powers under Section 85, but
Yeah.
Can you just give us an example of, is this sort of a list of decisions? Is there the details of what has been the decisions that have happened since the state of emergency?
So in the report, I've referred to some high-level powers under Section 85 that have been exercised, and so you will have seen the provision for the relief of distress, including emergency food, some action to regulate traffic, and the dissemination of information and advice to the public. You've also seen the information on exactly the activities and the decisions that the group controller is taking have been included in those situation reports that are being sent out to you daily. But it's really the group controllers themselves are probably in the best position to give you a little bit more detail on that decision making. And I can see from the report that in the extraordinary business section that there will be some information specifically on the activities that have been undertaken just in the last couple of days.
And thank you. That probably also will be that will probably be the answer to my second question, that it's perhaps the group controller who can answer better, just about, you know, what has actually happened in practice since the state of emergency, and how have those decisions been made, and has there been any elected member involvement? Particularly, I'm presuming that the mayor and deputy mayor has been consulted on some of the important decisions, but it would just be good to get a sense of, if we haven't had this delegation in place, what has actually been happening.
So the group controllers will be in the best position to answer that question. What I would say is that in all of the communications that we've had with the National Emergency Management Advisors, they have very much had the expectation that these Section 85 powers in a state of national emergency will be sitting with those controllers. And you will have seen the reference in the report that normally the position is that those powers are delegated in those group plans, and it just happens that we don't have a standing delegation in that group plan. But as I said, the group controllers are probably best placed to talk to you about how the decisions in practice have been made in the last couple of days.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold on to that question.
I'm just wondering if Mace Ward would like to comment on that.
Thank you, Worship, and good morning, members. So the decisions that have been taken range from simple things like standing up the Emergency Control Centre in Bledisloe House and coordinating activities across partners in Auckland and across or responding to directions from the National Controller and Director of Emergency Management. So those sort of logistical actions. The other activities are, another example is Great Barrier Air, so that we're securing supply lines to Great Barrier Aotea, securing supply lines to Kawau and Rakino Islands as well for food and essential medical supplies and other goods. And then on the instruction of the controller, as Meredith mentioned, from National Controller that is, setting up an 0800 number for emergency welfare, and we've also established a distribution centre at Spark Arena for emergency food and essential supplies, which will be operating on Monday.
Okay, Councillor Coombe, you're happy with that answer? You've got no further questions?
Thank you. That's a good response. Thank you. And also, I do just want to acknowledge getting that flight to Aotea, the daily flight in place, was something that was very significant, and I really appreciate that happening quickly, and the officers that were able to put that in place and provide that security for the community on Aotea.
Thank you, Councillor Coombe, for that. That's that was an important and necessary step, and I think we're dealing on a smaller scale with people that are on Rakino and Kawau Island as well. Next question, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we allowed to ask who the group controller is?
You certainly can. That's normally Kate Crawford, but there are acting controllers from time to time, so that takes some pressure off her. Mace, any further comment that you'd like to make on that? No? Good as gold. Further questions, Councillor? Okay. Councillor Angela Dalton.
No questions, thank you.
Now, I'm not hearing from councillors. I'm not sure whether they've got their mics off or may be away from their mic at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine, Angela. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No questions. Thank you. Councillor Coombe asked my question.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chris Darby.
Nothing at this time, yeah.
Councillor Alf Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, the only question I have is there a direct email or contact for us? I know we discussed last week around getting our CSAs to have any inquiries be sent. But if there is a situation, and it could happen, where a group gets set up by the Ministry of Health and the respective District Health Board to do testing, and possibility the use of the council car park, who can we get that authorisation from in light of the emergency that has been declared? That's my question.
Mace, can you give us an email on that, please?
Certainly, Your Worship. So, Councillor Filipaina, if you send that through to your CSA, and they can then contact into the Auckland Emergency Management Office, and we would get that authorisation for use of property. So that would be an example of exercising the Section 85 powers.
Sorry, Your Worship, just a supplementary. I mean, in the times that we are in, instead of me going to one place and then go to the other, why isn't there an email that we can go directly to, instead of going to one step that goes directly to that email?
We'll just get a comment back on that. Is there a more straightforward way that we can do that, Phil Wilson, perhaps?
Kia ora, Councillor. Councillor, we can look at that. What we're trying to do is obviously streamline the communication channel and avoid a load in terms of question numbers directly into the Emergency Management Office because of their busyness. But I'm happy to look further at this following the meeting.
Yeah, thank you for that. Sorry, Bishop. Yep, thank you, because I'm more streamlined, just go straight to the point. Understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Very clear, no questions.
IMSB member, Tau Henare.
No questions, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Shane Henderson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. No questions.
Councillor Richard Hills.
No, thank you. No questions.
Councillor Tracy Mulholland.
Good morning. No questions. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Daniel Newman.
No questions.
Councillor Greg Sayers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No questions.
Councillor Desley Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. No questions.
Councillor Sharon Stewart. So we can't.
Yes,
I can hear you now, Sharon.
Okay. Yes, I have got a question. So what is the contingency plan if the controllers, if we have, there could be a few controllers, but what's the contingency plan if any of them get sick? I know that there is a list, but it would be quite useful for us all to have that list and to be advised if something happens and who's going to be the control at the time.
Right. I'm looking at Mace. Can you provide an answer on that question?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Yes, certainly we do have a contingency plan in place with alternate controllers, typically 5 deep or more, and people who can support the controller as well in the various functions. But we can make sure we get through the situation reports and regular communications, we let you know who is going to be alternate controller and if anyone becomes ill.
Thank you, Councillor. Have you got any further questions?
No, first of all, I'd just like to thank, if I could just quickly, Kate Crawford and the staff, and I'd especially like to thank Sarah Stewart, who's doing all of the hard work down in Wellington, making sure that we're all updated with everything. So thank you for that.
Thank you. There are 1 or 2 people in Wellington that will become household figures over this period of time. Ashley Bloomfield and Sarah Stewart Black are certainly amongst those. IMSB Chair, David Taipere.
Kia ora, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions, or one question in particular. The Emergency Act has no reference to the Tiriti o Waitangi, and I note in the report for the Māori Impact Statement some general comments around that, and I'm assuming that later on in the briefing we'll get some more detail around what that is. But my question is around when you delegate this out, and I note we have members on the Civil Defence Committee for Council. I want to know how we can ensure, from a governance perspective, that the controllers are giving effect to the Māori outcomes, rather than just delegate over and hope that that's going to occur.
Thank you very much. Answer to that, Mace Ward.
Good morning, David. So we have set up a structure which we can share in the emergency management group for Auckland, which includes Pou Whakare, which includes reporting directly to the group controller to ensure that Māori outcomes and those needs of Māori community are taken into account as a priority. But we can give you more update in the briefing through Tanya Winslade when we get to that point.
Thank you. Chair Taipri, is there any further questions that you've got?
No, not really, but I just want to point out an example, and it's not civil defence, but it's Ministry of Health, and it's created an issue from my mind, and that is around tangihanga, when the authorities have decided that it might possibly be that people never get to go home to be buried with the rest of their tupuna, and maybe buried at the nearest cemetery. And I find that's sort of gone through without any involvement and consultation with Māori and understanding of things cultural. So that's the reason why I raised this as a matter, and I use that as an example. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think under the general briefing following the conclusion of the meeting, we'll have a chance to address that. That's been an issue that's caused possibly more pain immediately than any other, and it's in the Maori community, Pacifica community, Indian community. I've had concerns expressed. We've relayed those back to Wellington, and obviously, it's a balance between not helping the transmission of the virus, but meeting basic human and cultural needs, actually. But perhaps if we come back to that in the general session, and we can have further discussion around that. Councillor Walker.
Oh, just one question, Phil. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear, thank you.
Sure. I can appreciate that in this national emergency we've effectively delegated powers. Are we going to be having reporting back to this committee around the things that Auckland Council is doing and engaged with, so that we've got some oversight and some understanding on what role we're playing?
The answer to that is absolutely, and that's why we've got the item on the as an extraordinary item, and why we have the confidential briefing session immediately after the council meeting. So on both occasions, you'll have the opportunity to hear from officials, a few comments from me as well, and the chance to have input into what we're doing, why we're doing it. I am trying to ring councillors individually, but I'm finding that my days are pretty full from really from 7 to 7. So my apologies if I haven't got to everybody on that front.
Just a further question then around the confidential briefings. Obviously we've had those, at least on one occasion. Quite a bit of the material in the briefings would be of interest to the public. Is there any mechanism whereby we can inform people about some of the good work that we're doing?
Absolutely, and that's coming through our comms unit, through our daily briefings that we're getting from comms, and the public statements that I'm making, often in conjunction with other councillors. And again, one of the reasons I think we've got this response in public session is because I think it's important that people know the various things that Council is doing as part of a New Zealand Inc. effort to address the crisis that we're facing at the moment. We're obviously in health, not the lead player. As you'd expect, that's the Ministry of Health. The government has many of the levers that need to be pulled, but there are roles, key roles that councils are playing as well, and we'll address some of those on the next item on the agenda.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. In terms of the various actors who have been activated by the declaration, there's a reference made to local civil defence emergency groups. Now, I'm assuming that that's not any of the few groups that currently remain that work locally across Auckland. So we do have some local civil defence groups, a lot less than used to be the case, I might add. do they have any role in terms of this activation?
Okay, I'm just wondering who the best person to answer that one. Mace is
Good morning, Councillor Watson. Yes, they may be called on to assist, but our primary function at the moment is welfare. So our volunteer team in Auckland Emergency Management may be calling on those local emergency management groups to assist.
Okay, just a quick follow-up, Phil. It might be useful, councillors, for councillors to have a list of any such groups that do exist across Auckland and in which particular wards they're operating, just for our potential use or knowledge anyway.
Thank you. I'll ask Mace to respond to councillors with that list when they can put it together. Further questions, councillor?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Young.
No question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Thank you very much for that. We'll, as I suggested before, we'll work in reverse order now for any comments. So just please respond if you don't need to comment. So we'll start, Councillor Young, with you again. Any comments on the paper?
No, thank you.
Councillor Watson.
No comment.
Councillor Walker.
No comment.
Councillor IMSB Chair Taipere.
No comment.
Councillor Stewart.
No comment.
Councillor Simpson.
No comment.
Councillor Sayers.
No comment, Your Worship. Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
No comment.
Councillor Mulholland.
No comment.
Councillor Hills.
No, thank you.
Councillor Henderson.
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
IMSB member, Councillor Henry.
Thanks for the councillor.
Oh, sorry, did I say councillor again? I thought I said IMSB member.
Okay. That's okay, made my day. No comment, Your Worship.
Thank you. The salary didn't go with that, unfortunately. Councillor Fletcher.
No comment.
Councillor Filipina.
None.
Councillor Darby.
Nothing from me.
Councillor Dalton.
No comment.
Councillor Cooper.
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Coombe.
No comment, thank you.
Councillor Collins.
No comment, thanks, Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Just to say, Mr. Mayor, well done to the staff that have swung this process in smoothly and cleanly, and it's well thought out and thought through. I'm sure the information that flows that we look forward to coming will be coming in due course. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Casey.
No comment, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bartley.
No comment, Mr. Mayor, except to say good work, Meredith. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And that means that we can now come to the resolution. The resolution, the recommendation is on the screen in front of you, and I'll ask Sandra to take a division call on this, please.
Yes, councillors, you are voting on the clauses in front of you. Please be clear with your answer so we can get that recorded correctly. Mayor Goff.
Yes.
Councillor Bartley.
Yes.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
For.
Councillor Coombe.
Aye.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dalton.
Aye.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Filipina.
5.
Councillor Fletcher.
4.
IMSB member Henare.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
For.
Councillor Hills.
Aye, thank you.
Councillor Mulholland.
For.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Sayers.
For.
Councillor Simpson.
For.
Councillor Stewart.
For.
IMSB Chair Taipere.
For.
Councillor Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Young.
For.
That was unanimous.
We don't need to tally that one up. You passed unanimously. We'll now